All right, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As always, host Brandon. We have Matt Law update. That is right, Matt. A big kind of week off the pitch after the loss to Southampton. Chelsea fans are riding, and a little bit understandable. So I think it's probably been an interesting few days as we're Wednesday after recording.
Yeah, it has. It just feels like a whirlwind with Chelsea at the moment. I mean, Graham Potter's in the eye of the storm, and the storm just keeps sort of swirling around at the moment. They can't get it to move on, and that always makes me busy.
Without a doubt. And obviously you had the big article, I think a little bit is you had the exclusive kind of the top five. Graham Potter told to don your tin hat and fight as he is getting a lot of heat. Obviously, he addressed it in the press conference. He did get that kind of like unfair question of like, fans think you should be sacked. And it's like, well, I mean, we don't want social media to invade these pressers. So, but he's getting it from all angles. But it sounds like there's a very different conversation happening, maybe at Cobham and behind the scenes, and obviously the discourse in public.
Yeah, look, I mean, I didn't actually, I've watched the Southampton game. I didn't actually go to it. But I believe that some of those questions were influenced by things that were actually being directly shouted at the press box by fans at the game, not just social media. I often stick up for the match-going fans against sort of what one might claim social media fans. But actually, this was based on people shouting things at the press box and saying he should be sacked and things like that. And I think people were shouting he's the worst manager in our history and things. And I think if things like that are being thrown at the press box, it's kind of fair enough for the press to then reflect them back at Graham, even though I agree it's always uncomfortable and feels harsh. I don't like stuff that's just swirling around on Twitter or social media necessarily being thrown at him, because you never really know who's saying it and who it can be attributed to. So that's that. With every defeat or every non-win comes another question mark over Graham's future. And every response continues to be, we're supporting him, we're backing him. And that was unequivocal. I mean, I checked on Saturday night, first of all, and was told absolutely unequivocally nothing has changed in terms of the support and the backing. I then sort of rechecked that on Sunday and went back to get more detail, if I could, on exactly why, which is what spurred the piece I wrote on the 5 reasons why. And it was still, nothing had changed. I wondered whether there could have been conversations in between time, but no. They're very, very determined to support and back him, and they're very determined that they feel there are good reasons to back him and also good mitigating reasons as to why things haven't been as good, albeit I think there's a complete agreement on all levels that the Southampton defeat was unacceptable. But a decision that there has been mitigating factors, and there's enough that they've seen within data mainly to suggest that better times are around the corner.
Yeah, you kind of talked about that and you had some nice data in the piece. Again, head over to the Telegraph to check out Matt's article. It's linked in. We're not going to obviously spoil it. But they did have kind of the data here as far as, shot creation and chances. Yeah. And I did hear, I don't know if it was, one of the BBC podcasts or something like that, but they're talking about, is it Potter's fault? I guess, like, if the chances aren't being finished. I mean, you think about the Raheem Sterling header point blank, you're like, what are the odds that doesn't go in? And of course, we're hitting that bingo card every single time right now, because nothing's, we just can't get that break. But like, this is kind of him at Brighton, really good at XG, just not like the actual goals compared to, is kind of a thing that stuck with him.
It is. I think I listened to the same podcast actually as you, and I actually thought it was a really good discussion. But I don't see how a coach can coach a team to be good at XG and not scoring. I don't see that can be something the coach is doing, because if you create lots of big chances in a game, if your XG is good, then you should score goals. I don't see how a coach can do one thing and and get a setup and a team and an approach that creates these chances, and yet he can be responsible for them not going in. I just can't wrap my head around how that would be the case. Albeit, you are right, the problems that Chelsea are having now and the data that Chelsea have now is very similar to the data at Brighton. Now, Brighton clearly had, certainly when Graham was there, and for the majority of Graham's time, they didn't really have any strikers of note at all. I mean, I think Neil Maupay had a good season, and when they did score, their goals would quite often have come from the flanks and midfield through Trossard and more latterly McAllister. So he has better strikers at Chelsea, albeit the striker thing is still an issue at Chelsea. And I don't see what he can do to change the fact that Raheem Sterling or whoever else didn't. Raheem Sterling versus Southampton, the header doesn't go in. João Felix against Borussia Dortmund, those two chances, neither of them scored. I don't actually see what Graham Potter can do about that. Yeah. He can practice finishing as much as he likes on the training field. I'm sure that is happening. But as long as they are creating the big chances, you tend to find that it does turn. I mean, I through covering Tottenham as well, I used to talk with Pochettino a lot about this. And when results were bad, he would often say that he was in a safer position than Graham, but he would often say he didn't actually care about the result. What he cared about was the evidence to show that things were being done correctly and what he was doing on the training ground work, because he would always believe in the fact that as long as everything showed that the results eventually would take care of themselves. And pretty much that was the case for him. And he would always argue that the result itself for him was not the biggest problem. But Graham's in a different situation. The result is the biggest problem for him. But yeah, the data, I mean, the data that was run with the piece, there's more big chances being created. The XG is certainly higher than the goals being scored. The XG has generally gone up in the last month. I mean, obviously it fluctuates a little bit between games. All the evidence, if you put it into numbers and crunch numbers, all the evidence is actually in the last month, performances in terms of attacking chances have improved. And all the evidence would suggest that with a turn of luck or with one bit of confidence, it will turn. And we know that these owners love data. They absolutely crunch data. So I would imagine they've got way more detailed data than we use that all points towards the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are those trends. The eye test says you take a step forward, then a step back, and it's just kind of this roller coaster. But it's not just that. I mean, there's still squad, rotation and issues as well. I mean, you talked about how the medical staff was like, we got to take our best players out, because I think my perspective as a fan for Potter is like, you need to put the best 11 you have out every single week until you can get like a run of games. So people look at it like, why didn't Reece James play? Like, why didn't maybe even a Kai Havertz or Mudryk play? Because they are considered starters, at least at this point. And now we hear, thanks to the article, that, well, actually the medical department is saying, no, don't. And so he's trying to lean into all of his different, people, I guess, around the club. And that comes to him probably building trust and rapport with the different departments so they can all be aligned in moving towards a long-term finish, whereas Maurizio Sarri will play N'Golo Kante no matter what he's told.
Yeah, and Jose was a big believer in playing people sort of no matter what, on painkilling injections and things. Most managers, I was going to say every manager has their own way. In actual fact, 90% of managers was always try and push the player to play rather than go with the medical staff. And particularly in such a large number of players would probably take a risk on some and not on others who they feel might be able to come through it. I mean, the reason I got hold of that information was literally because I went to people saying, what was his team selection all about? Like, I've defended this guy, I'm a believer in this guy, but I cannot defend that team selection. Then it was explained to me. Really interestingly, actually, today, I think on the Chelsea website, they've actually put out their own line that the medical staff asked him not to play those players, and that they're now all fully available for the weekend, which I thought was really interesting, that the website are actually also, officially confirming that information, which would normally be quite private information, and that they obviously want that to be out there and shared, and it's clear that this is a collaboration. If the coach is going to be held responsible, then maybe there has to be some responsibility put onto the medical department as well, not in a bad way, but just in the way that they've advised him this and he's followed it, and there's no reason why that should have to be a secret. He didn't throw them under the bus. I know full well that the ownership are actually, they're devastated about the result, but they're actually really pleased with the decision Potter took. Rather than doing something to try and save his own skin, he did something for the players and for the club. And also, what I would stress, I wrote an article yesterday that N'Golo Kante is now very, very close to signing a new contract. You brought Sarri into that. I would actually imagine that an approach like this would have an impact on Kante's decision, because Kante was scarred for months and years by what happened to him with Sarri. He became very, very reluctant to trust managers and to trust people telling him to just play when he had a bit of a knock or what of an injury. He became very uncomfortable. I know that for an absolute fact. I've spoken to former managers about that very point, about Kante losing faith in the club, losing trust in the people who were responsible for his fitness. So if you're going to keep a player like that with those issues, I'd imagine that what Potter did at the weekend will actually, and this is not some PR exercise for Potter, but what he did at the weekend will certainly be factored into N'Golo Kante's decision going forwards.
All right. Well, I mean, that's obviously a positive, not only to see him on the pitch with the team, but also progress in the contracts. That's really interesting. I think you did say it, right? He made a decision with it, which is best for the players in the club, maybe, and at his detriment. And you kind of talk about in the article, it sounds like the owners feel like he's taking a long-term approach. He wants to do right by the club, with the investment the owners have made. They've kind of said to him, like, hey, this isn't a short project for us. We need you to really get everything settled. So I guess from what I gleaned out of your article is that the owners, they're good. They hear the noise, but they're not getting uncomfortable with the situation.
And I think there's a realization that they have to take a bit of responsibility for this as well. I mean, they want a coach who's willing to work towards the broader plan and the broader future and the well-being of the club, rather than selfish, what they would seem selfish means. And I still disagree with the Aubameyang thing, but the Aubameyang fits into that. A selfish coach would put Aubameyang in right now because he would probably score a goal. I still think Aubameyang should be playing. Clearly, by looking at David Datro Fofana, he's also got an eye on what they feel probably is someone for the longer term, what they feel for someone who maybe deserves to be looked at and not judged on sort of what's gone on previously. I don't agree with it. I actually think it's in keeping with what the owners have preached and what they want. So what is happening at the moment, I think there is a realization in the ownership that they have to take a bit of responsibility. Graham Potter's responsible for results, but the way in which Graham Potter is managing is in line with what they want. And that's why they're backing him, because they're pleased with the way he's managing. They're just not pleased with the results.
Yeah. Obviously, they are bolstered by that, because when they stuck with that manager at the Dodgers, it paid off in the long run, right? And
yeah,
so
they've been here before. I mean, I've spoken to people about that. They've been here before with the Dodgers manager. He's been through some really tough times, and they've always stuck by him. I think he's been there 10 or 11 years now. He's clearly had good times and bad times, and they've been through ups and downs. Certainly the Boehly side have. Obviously the Clear Lake side are newer into sport, I think, than the Boehly side. But the Boehly side has been through ups and downs in sport, has been through disappointing runs, through fan disenchantment before, albeit in a different sport and maybe at a slightly different level. And they feel that their evidence from them, their own experiences, is that by putting your faith in the guy and trusting the guy, that's how you get the long-term results rather than a short-term bounce.
Yeah, really, really fascinating, in which I can see. We'll take a quick ad break. When we get back, I have another follow-up on the feelings around the camp. So thank you to the sponsors, and we'll be right back. So what about the players? Do you have an idea? Obviously, you mentioned N'Golo Kante felt like the Potter had his back as manager. I guess there's the Mason stuff, which maybe is a thing or isn't a thing. But I guess in general, do you know how the players are taking on to Graham Potter and his staff?
Yeah, look, they've got a squad of, we've talked about it before, to 34 players. And there's going to be players annoyed or disappointed with their situations. And I think we can guess a few of them quite easily. But broad brushstrokes, I am told that actually the players really like Graham. If you meet Graham Potter, it's very hard whatever you make of him as a manager, whatever you think of him, it's very hard not to like him, because it's very clear immediately he's a decent human being. He's a man with very decent traits and morals. And I can't imagine, it'd be very weird to have a scenario where someone would take a massive dislike to him, because he's just not that kind of personality. He's not a combative personality, which obviously has been criticised for. So it's very, look, in the past, I am absolutely sure that, and this has happened, a run of results, not even as bad as this, but anywhere near this, I would have had several stories out already about problems at the training ground, fights at the training ground. Under Tuchel, I had a fight between Kepa and Rudiger after I think they'd lost their first game in I don't know how long, against West Brom at home or wherever it was. Under Kante, I had the big story about Diego Costa when they were going to win the league, going mental at the training ground and threatening to China. The amount of fights and blow-up stories I've had at Chelsea's training ground is, I can't count them. And and by the way, I know of way more than I've ever written. You know, these have been going on since the dawn of time. And I'm sure there'll have been cross words at that training ground, but the fact that they've gone through what they've gone through, and there's not been a peep or a whisper of a fight story, of a row story at the training ground, of this player, that player, or en masse them turning against Graham, he's lost a dress. There's not been any of that. And that's not because they've suddenly become super brilliant at keeping all their information in-house, because if you look at the transfer window, lots of information still gets out of Chelsea. I genuinely believe it's because it hasn't happened. And that would suggest that broadly, the atmosphere is still quite good and quite positive, albeit I'm sure everyone's disappointed, and that the players actually do like Graham Potter, but that has got to translate into results, and it's got to translate into results very, very quickly.
Yeah. And that's the balance, I think, with a lot of fans. Did I read or hear that he kind of abandoned his really deep philosophy of Brighton and is just trying to be a little bit more pragmatic right now?
I haven't heard that myself. I don't know. I mean, this is a time where lots of theories will be going around. What I would say is, I listened to one of your pods with Nick talking about the identity and the fact there's no identity yet. And I think it's a fair comment, but all I would come back and say to that is, how's he meant to have an identity in that team yet, with the amount of turnover of players through injury and signings? It's very clear, I think, that he would not have structured the squad the way it was in the summer. They've then had all the injuries. They've then brought all the players in January, drip of them being available and big players starting to come back. I've got to be honest, I wouldn't expect to see an identity yet. What I think he has failed in so far is to create something pragmatic, to do exactly what you just said that maybe people are saying he's looking to do, to create something that just gets him through and work on, and you worry about an identity later down the line, because with the amount of turnover, the identity is not just going to come. To my mind, now he's got the players back, pretty much all of them, obviously Kante to come. He needs to find a team, he needs to find a formation and a team to stick with and to get him through. Mm-hmm. And then he can worry about the rest and work on the rest in the background and longer term. The owners say that ideally the plan would be for him to certainly finish this season and even finish next season before the original plan was to review him at the end of next season, once he's had a whole full season with what they would deem his squad. I'm sure there'll be some sort of review at the end of the season anyway. But in actual fact, despite they say all that, and I believe them on all that, I still think the next 3 games are massive for Potter. They look a massive 3 games for me. Whether the opinion of the board would change that quickly, or whether it would just mean that a change in the summer became inevitable, or what. But the board, let me tell you, the board are not saying next 3 games. The board are saying long term. And like I say, their preferable plan is to the end of the season and the season after. But for me, I look at it and just think these next 3 games are huge for him.
Right. I mean, obviously Tottenham away. Well, it's to the point where in your article, the tin pot one, you said that, hey, you know what, Behdad, Todd, we're going to stop down for a little bit. We're going to watch these next 3 games. So I think you can imply that there's a focus from them. Tottenham away, right? Yeah. It's just a rivalry. So talk about a moral victory, an uplift. I think losing to Tottenham, even though they just crept in the top 4, the fans, obviously it would be hard for us to take. But then you've got Leeds at home, and then obviously Dortmund at home in a couple of days. We're doing our part. We're going to try to bring 24 Americans over to add a little extra spice and fight, see if we can do our part to help, turn it around. But in all seriousness, Leeds just hired a manager, Javi Garcia. They are, going to get that new manager bounce, classic, the week after we get there. And then even the Dortmund match, which looked good. The problem was Southampton didn't. But if you're saying our best 11 is Dortmund, then there is hope. Again, how many times can we see this 11 in the next couple of weeks? They got a week off in between. I mean, Potter gave the guys 2 days off in preparation for Spurs, which kind of went back to his man management. Everyone said, bring them in, run them, like not good enough. And I think he's a little bit more, obviously.
Well, it's a bit more modern.
Yeah.
That's very old fashioned view. Bring them in, run them, all that business. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And they're 3 massive games. There's no point bringing them in, running them, and then getting a load of injuries and still having 2 massive games. Look, I would, if he can obviously get through in the Champions League and either win both the others or win and draw. I mean, obviously, draw at home to Leeds wouldn't be great, but draw away to Spurs, I think would get him through to the Leeds games with not too much dissatisfaction. If they can then win the next 2, obviously it depends on the circumstances of how that result comes about. But I look at what he's got. I mean, look, I watch a lot of Tottenham. I was at Tottenham at the weekend, which is why I wasn't at Chelsea. And I watch a lot of Tottenham. And I would love to see him match them up. I would love to see him go Wesley Fofana, Thiago Silva, Badiashile, obviously Reece, Chile, both the wing backs, Fernandes. You would hope Kovacic is a bit fitter and a bit more on it, having got that Southampton game under it, probably Kovacic. And then I would want Raheem in the forward 3. And then the other 2 is kind of up to what he sees on the training ground. I would like them to match Tottenham just because I feel it works well against them when I see opposition teams do it against them. He might not want to do that, but I really feel that when you look at the team he can put up, they can hurt Tottenham, and they should be able to hurt Tottenham. So I would be very disappointed if they're not very competitive in that game, because I've obviously watched more Chelsea than Tottenham, but I've watched a lot of Tottenham. And when I look at the options he has available to him this weekend, I do think they can hurt Tottenham.
Yeah, because I know their defensive has been a little loose. 4-1 loss against Leicester, did beat City with the red card, but it seems to be their thing. They always beat City for some reason.
I mean, anyways. Look, if you were to pitch the wing backs against each other, Reece up against Ben Davis, Chilwell up against Emerson Royale, Dyer's had a poor season. If you can get pace at Dyer, look, they've pace at Longley, who's been playing on the left side of defence. They've got weapons. Bentancur is a massive miss for Spurs in the middle. Chelsea have got the weapons to really hurt them this game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that we'll see, I guess, just really how all of that shakes out. All of us Chelsea fans are just walking on eggshells right now, kind of result to result, trying to see how it goes. I guess it's a big picture, right? Because we were talking with some of the friends and things like that. And not only is there a lot going on, I guess, with the staff, do you feel like with the new recruiting team, and this is just more of I don't understand it completely, Vivell, Winstanley, all of the team, do they help with player exits as well? Because you talk about this loaded squad. Are they going to be?
Yes. They'll be working hard on that now.
Okay.
That's, in terms of what they're doing around transfer. Look, I think probably we can probably estimate, and this is my estimate, that the squad from January is probably about 75% complete in terms of incoming. There will be a lot more outgoing than incoming in the summer. I can tell you that for absolutely sure. And that's exactly what they'll be working on now. They'll be doing the rounds of clubs. They'll be trying to set things up. It's a bit early to get things nailed down, but for sure that process will have started. There will be a process going on about evaluating which players, particularly those players who are in either the last year or last 2 years of their contracts, which they can sell, which they can get value on, how the squad's going to shape up. I'm sure there's a lot of conversations between the sporting team and Graham about what the squad size needs to be, because we've got to assume at the moment that Graham will be manager at the end of the season. If that changes, it changes. And they need to know what he needs to, in the summer, have the number of players, that his optimum number of players. He needs to have that, and they've got to deliver that for him, whether it be 23, 24, 25, whatever. But they can't go through a summer where even in pre-season he's trying to struggle all this, because the pre-season will become farcical if it is. So they will be working hard on evaluations of which players, where the value can come, and who realistically can be shifted and where, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I mean, that was obviously a problem this season, as we witnessed, firsthand with Tuchel and the squad, and it being imbalanced and people who didn't want to be there. And it was just, it was almost a wasted exercise, the summer tour, because the
preseason was a mess.
Kennedy was playing right back consistently, like people were getting minutes. It was bad all around. And so, they have
that's why he was playing. That's why he was playing. Preseason was a huge mess. I'm not going to blame anyone. I don't want to blame anyone, but preseason was a huge mess.
It's objectively a fact. So they need to learn and get ahead of it. So we'll see if these new people kind of get it. You put something in my mind. All right. I'm going to take my last ad break when we get back, round it up, look ahead, N'Golo Kante, and then we'll be out. Here we go. All right. Just to help us either continue to light Twitter on fire or to put some of the flames out, is one, allegedly Maurizio Pochettino had been reached out by intermediaries.
Incorrect. Completely wrong. I'm sorry to, I don't like doing this to reporters, but it's not a reporter I particularly know. I'm just told from all sides it's not true. I have connections into Maurizio Pochettino from my Tottenham days as well, so I'm able to check this at both ends, let's say, and just not true at all. So yeah, I mean, that is. I would like to talk about this though. I mean, for the people, I fully respect people's opinion if they are so disenchanted with the results and so frustrated that they feel that there should be a change. People are entitled to that opinion. I don't want to rubbish that opinion. It's not my opinion, but I don't want to rubbish that opinion. What I would say is I haven't heard yet of a convincing plan for what you would do if you sack him. What do you do? Because if you sack him, his staff leaves. There's nobody there who's going to suddenly take over in the building who's going to be an interim manager. Don't quote John Terry at me as an interim manager. Not going to happen. And then there's nobody on the market. There's no Gus Hiddink or someone like that around who's going to come in as an interim manager. I don't think there's a top-class manager out there who's going to take it at the moment in mid-season. I mean, that was a point when I did my 5 reasons. They were impressed that Potter was prepared to take this on mid-season. Lots of managers don't want to do that. We already know they wouldn't be offering it Bielsa, but were they to offer it Bielsa, he'd want to manage the under-21s till the summer. Everton found that out. I haven't heard a convincing plan. I've heard lots of people say he should be sacked, and that's absolutely fine. That's their opinion. But I'm yet to hear one person or one voice or one message on Twitter say something that makes any sense for what they would do if they sacked him.
The only kind of face that I would miss in this situation, which is why I don't think they can, and I think why Roman got away with it a lot, is Steve Holland. Steve Holland was there through every managerial change, until he left to join England. Without Steve Holland there, who has that Chelsea DNA, that connective tissue amongst transitions, it's everyone out. If you sack Graham, everybody's gone, and you're now promoting the dev squad coaching staff, essentially, or you bring in some of the lone coaches or whatever.
Well, it'd probably be Anthony Barry, to be honest with you, thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But he's not Steve Holland. He's not someone who has that experience of Steve Holland. And I'm telling you now, they wouldn't be able to get Steve Holland to do that. Funnily enough, they looked at doing that when they do you remember when they were going to sack Sarri? The Cardiff away game when everybody was chanting against Sarri. It's a terrible game. I think there was a last minute Aspie equaliser or something like that in the game. And they were going to sack Sarri. They really considered it. And what they looked into doing was trying to bring Steve Holland back to take interim charge till the end of the season. And they couldn't do it. So they had to abandon sacking Sarri. So there's not a solution out there. And the other thing about it is it would make them a mockery. You know, they'd have sacked two managers in one season. What good manager is going to want to work for them? Mm-hmm. Why do you want to work for guys who just sack the Champions League winning manager after 5 minutes, say there's a long-term project and that they've got faith in this guy, which I trust. But if that ends up not being the case and they sack this guy, who's going to trust them? Nobody's going to trust them. And the media will call them clowns. The spotlight will go firmly onto them because the media will start to call them clowns, which I don't think they are. And like I say, I think what they are doing is sensible and in some ways admirable, albeit with the caveat that results have got to come really quick.
Right. And I think that's probably the thesis of this is neither you or I are advocating for strategy. I think I'm just trying to help explain maybe where the thinking is from the hierarchy, because this is a new ownership group, right? Like Roman, we know what's happening, gone. Okay, we get that, but it's not. This is a brand new team. They have a new ownership style. They have an approach. You know, we've seen the comms this season, right? The social media is way more.
Everything's changed.
Yeah, personable. So I guess from, your perspective as well, that's what I think I'm trying to outlay with a lot of this, because it'd be easy for us to say, yeah, sack Potter and move on. But I think there's some nuances and context that you're able to provide, which I think is good, and a lot of that article, again, go back and check it out, talks about that also, Graham Potter, which I don't think any fan really cares, took a risk by coming here mid-season, not having a preseason, inheriting a fragmented squad potentially, and things like that. So the owners feel like he's owed some time as well.
Yeah, and what I also think, I wrote about it, but I do think it has been missed on a wider level, is one of the co-sporting directors they brought in is from Brighton, is a guy who works with them really closely at Brighton. That's a massive signal of where their head's at and where the support's going to be for him. People will laugh, and I understand why, at any comparison between Cheeky and Pep Guardiola, because they're on this level. They are at the very, very top level. And Graham Potter and Paul Winstanley would not ever claim to be on a similar level to Pep Guardiola and Cheeky Berighiston. But that's what Manchester City did. Once they got the manager, they built the team around him with quite a lot of people who'd already worked with him and supported him before and knew how this guy ticked, and they knew how to get the best out of each other. And that's what Paul Winstanley, it's not just what Paul Winstanley's there for, but that's clearly part of the reason why Paul Winstanley's there. And I think it's partly been missed that there's this link between Graham and Paul Winstanley, which would make it very surprising if it was cut short very, very quickly.
Yeah, because again, want to make it the long operating thing. I don't know. It's obviously a tough time. There's no doubt about it, right? New ownerships, they're learning a lot as well. I think that their learning curve is immense. But again, with them coming over for 3 matches, it seems like, for all intents and purposes, they're firmly involved. And I think everyone should remember that this is not their only venture. These are very busy people who have a million plates spinning up in the air, yet they're able to dedicate a lot of time and attention. It's a 10-year deal. Even if, Chelsea, I've seen Boehly out, which, give me a break. He just splashed 600 million. No one was complaining as all the players came in, and Enzo Fernandez. So that I am kind of rubbishing a little bit, but they are here. They're involved. It's a 10-year deal. This isn't a vanity project for them. And I think that there is pain and friction and frustration as they learn. But to your point, it's with an idea. There's a purpose. There's a plan in place. Is it going perfectly right now? No. But you think about it, you get through this season, you have a summer, you have a reset, you clear out some squad, he gets a preseason. It could be completely different. That's the gamble. And fans were fickle. It's hard to see that long-term payout.
It's also, Graham will probably now there'll be a section of supporters, whether they're online or match going, it could be both. There'll be a section of supporters where Graham might not ever win them fully over again. They might have just decided this guy's not for us, fine. I do think that the ups and downs with football supporters are such, if the next 3 results go well, the mood will completely change. The mood will completely change. And I don't think I've heard people say, oh, it's becoming a lost cause with him and the fans. I don't agree with that. It might be a lost cause with him and some fans, but the fans as a broad stroke, I've actually, in my time covering Chelsea, I've actually always found the Chelsea fans quite a patient bunch, to be fair. Certainly with players, Fernando Torres, they were extremely patient with. Timo Werner most lately, very patient with. I actually think up until the Southampton game, they've been pretty patient with Potter. And I do think that a lot of the noise will quiet down an awful lot if he can have a good run of this 3 games. And I then think he can certainly get to the summer. And as you say, it's almost time for a reset button then. So I don't think it's a lost cause, even though there'll always be certain people who don't think one way until the time ever comes or doesn't arrive whereby he stands up and puts a trophy on the table.
Yeah. Hopefully the Champions League is obviously starting to dwindle even from the Why Not Us crew. But again, it's only 1-0.
Hey, I was going to say,
away goals don't count, which is lucky for Liverpool.
I came on the show last week or the week before and said, look, I think they're in the conversation on the Champions League just because I think the Champions League is wide open. And I still think that. I don't think 1-0, that hasn't changed my opinion at all. I really do fully expect them to go through, actually. I really do. I know that might sound absolutely mental after they've just lost at home to Southampton. But I really confidently expect them to go through in the Champions League.
Thankfully, a lot of time between matches. So we'll get you a Why Not Us shirt when we come over. I guess anything else? I mean, N'Golo Kante returning, positive talks in the contract.
Massive news.
I mean, if nothing else, there's a moral win for Chelsea fans. Someone said like N'Golo Kante returning is like a big, impact for Potter and the squad. And they're like, that's bollocks. And I was like, in what world does N'Golo Kante returning to full fitness, like full fitness, not boost the squad? If nothing else, the morale. N'Golo Kante is the nicest guy who invokes a smile out of the most like curmudgeon of people. I mean, he's amazing.
Listen to Thomas Tuchel at the end of last season. I'll always remember this press conference because it shocked me. And he said, he's our Neymar, he's our Mbappe, he's our Messi. He is that player for us. He changes everything for us. Tuchel was saying it in a rant about having to get him on the pitch more. And it just struck a chord with everybody.
Well, won the Champions League with him. He had man of the match performance match after match.
You just cannot underestimate what a difference that man makes. I mean, he is superhuman. He's one of my favourite ever players in the Premier League. He is superhuman. Just because he's not a striker or a forward player who's going to score 30 goals, don't give me that. He changes everything, absolutely everything. And I don't want to start overhyping it. I'm told he looks in great shape for where he is at the moment. There's a lot of excitement around the fitness he's going to come back with. I think they've taken it super slowly and super carefully this time. It would just be enormous. I mean, he warmed up the other day, so I still think it's going to be a few weeks. I touch and go whether he could be in that Dortmund squad or not. I'm sure that's one he himself has maybe got his eye on. But it's massive. It's massive. I mean, God, I just think to put it in my own perspective as a Villa fan, if Villa ever had a player like N'Golo Kante ready to come back, oh my God, it would be, when Jack Grealish was injured, we were always in pieces. Jack's got to come back. Jack's going to come back. I mean, with the greatest respect to Jack, N'Golo Kante's on several different levels, and to have this player back will change so much.
I'm thrilled. Like, if we get to see a little NG action while we're over there, that would warm my heart without a doubt. Is it as simple as he just slots in next to Enzo? It's him and Enzo kind of holding.
I'd imagine so.
Okay. Yeah. It seems like back four almost by requirement based on who's available, but it kind of seems like that 4-2-3-1 is Potter's preferred formation, at least for the time being. So that's
what we've got to see. That's exactly what, when we're talking about all these players back now, I want to start to see a settled formation. I mean, I would understand it, and I would actually support it, because I've just said it'd be the right thing to do if he matched up against Tottenham, because I think that's a good way to get at Tottenham in their formation. But otherwise, I want to see him find a formation and stick to it really when the players are available. And yeah, Kante and Fernandes just look like a really fantastic potential partnership there. And yeah, Kante, look, it's easy as well to sort of take the fact that Kante is going to sign this new contract with a bit of a pinch of salt, because it's rumbled on for so long, and he's been injured while it's been rumbling on. So it's not as though he's been putting in 10 out of 10 performances and everyone's been losing their shit over whether they might lose this player. I think it's gone a little bit under the radar. You know, N'Golo Kante signing a new contract is massive. You know, think back to Eden Hazard. If Eden Hazard had have signed a new contract and renewed rather than ended up going to Real Madrid, but everyone would have been dancing down the street celebrating. If Kante signs a new contract and is committed to Chelsea for another two with an option 3 years or something, it's massive, massive news for Chelsea, even though I think everyone accepts that everyone got to be realistic about the amount of playing time with him.
Yeah, well, for sure. It's big, obviously, especially with Champions League. I mean, you could literally just use him in that competition as long as we have it this season and kind of save him. Almost like Koulibaly will be used exclusively for that. You would think. Yeah, it's great to hear the extension update. Obviously, I don't know. You said something kind of triggered it. Now I've lost it again already, but it's just the way it is. I think there's just so many things swirling in my head, you know, in preparation for Tottenham and obviously in N'Golo, and just reminding me of better days that we once had. So yeah, I'm excited to see how they go. You know, I think seeing Wesley Fofana back, Chilwell playing almost the 90 minutes. There's a really big, I think, just probably, and I'm sure inside Cobham, there's a lift. I feel like they probably are feeling much better. I was surprised to see West play 45, but he looked good.
Yeah, there will be a lift. And did you see they put out the training pictures with Kante doing the warm-up, albeit a warm-up? I mean, I think I've read something recently from Tony Rudiger, who said when you just look at Kante and you see him on the training pitch and he smiles, it's like a thing. It's like if someone yawns, it makes you yawn. If N'Golo Kante smiles, the whole place smiles. I mean, Kante being back on the training pitch, honestly, will be a huge lift to everybody. It will lift that mood massively. And yeah, you're right. With the amount of players now coming back, I think there will be a lift in mood, albeit there'll be a few people thinking, how often am I going to play now? But you know, that's the problem they've created for themselves. And with every squad that's picked, there's always going to be a story of who's left out, not just left out of the team, but left out of the squad.
Yeah.
Because there just simply won't be enough places in the squad. And what they will have found out at Southampton, I think they'll have found out a little bit about, when we talk about player sales, they've probably found out a little bit about who's going to stick around and who's not going to stick around, I think, maybe, because, you know, a few backups were given an opportunity and maybe didn't take it, and possibly underlined thoughts on where their futures might be best. So in the long term, that might end up being useful, a painful lesson, shall we say.
Yeah. The manager has to find out if they can trust a player or not, you know, for sure. It only took till end of February to get everyone healthy in this team, which is crazy. The like last thing, just real quickly, because we haven't touched on it, was Cucurella had a home invasion. He was burglarized earlier this season. That's why he missed time. That was the personal thing Potter was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time ago. I mean, it was something. It was something that was hinted at for a while without any sort of details coming out. I kind of have been aware of this for a while, and only really recently sort of felt comfortable into the public domain, having spoken to a few people. But yeah, from the time that Sterling was burgled, Cucurella was burgled, so quite early on in his Chelsea career, I think it's caused settling issues with him. I don't think I think this would come out earlier if he was making the excuse of this, then he or the club looking to excuse form or excuse anything else by using this. But it shows you stuff's going on in the background. And I don't think anyone would try and, as I say, excuse his form, but maybe when he's getting permanently booed whenever he comes on or off the pitch, which I really don't like, maybe that's when people could sort of have second thoughts over doing that, because the guy's not had an easy time on the pitch, or, as people now are aware, off the pitch. And the booing on and off the pitch, I really don't like, to be honest with you. I would get it if he'd done something wrong, if he'd done something horrendous to the fans, if he'd given an interview like Lukaku gave, or if he'd have done some gesture to the fans or something like that, then I get it. But the guy's not really done any. His biggest crime has been to not play very well and will cost £60 million, which I know that annoys people, but don't boo the guy on and off the pitch all the time. Come on.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll wrap there. Appreciate all the time as always. Like I said, this is really not to solve anything, but just to provide context and clarity. And again, Matt, you pumped out a bunch of articles since post Southampton. So again, everyone go check it out. The Telegraph will put some links in the description per usual. We retweet them as always. So yeah, I appreciate it, Matt. We'll see you soon. Obviously big lead up.
See you in London.
I know this is kind of the Matt Law Telegraph derby.
I didn't know that 24 were coming. I thought it was just the three of you. Well, three of you and your production staff. I know that you travel everywhere with the production staff.
No, we've
you
got
even go on your personal holidays with the production staff.
21 fans are coming with. So
wow.
Yeah.
Have you got a private jet?
Nope. We're all gonna meet up in Kensington is where we're gonna stay.
Kensington.
Yeah.
Wow. I need to talk to you about my fee if you can afford to stay in Kensington.
Sounds good. We can explain it. Group rate. We'll start a GoFundMe. So
good stuff. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Go follow Matt as always. We'll be back with more content. Famous CFC later this week, and hopefully he's even sneaking in Tickerman. So anyways, until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.